no emotion as the use of animals in medical experiments. Dr. Michael Carey of New Orleans learned that the hard way. As a young MASH neurosurgeon in Vietnam, he worked in field hospital operating rooms to save the lives of hundreds of brain-injured soldiers. It was in that war that Dr. Carey discovered how many battle fatalities resulted from bullet or shrapnel injuries to the head. That's why he came home determined to do something about it.
Look at the Vietnam Wall. Every other name on the Vietnam Wall who died in ground combat died of a brain wound.
What?
Every other name on the Vietnam Wall who died in ground combat, where it can be traced to a single wound, died of a brain wound.
Dr. Carey's Vietnam experience left him with a searing image of the soldiers whose lives he could not save.
And I remember one night I was operating on a 19-year-old boy, and he had a severe brain wound, and I thought I could save him. But his heart stopped beating as I was operating on him, and he died. And his life just slipped out from my fingers. And I've never forgotten that.
Ever since he came back from Vietnam, Dr. Carey has kept in touch with many of the soldiers he operated on. He has followed their recovery, determined to find a way for others to survive a bullet or shrapnel wound to the brain. So in 1983, Dr. Carey put together a research proposal for the Army to study head wounds at his lab at Louisiana State University in New Orleans. And the Army gave him $2 million to set up a medical experiment that simulated the type of brain injuries suffered by soldiers in combat.
The most important thing our research was showing was that we were studying a drug which made the injured brain get better faster and get better to a greater extent, to get better further. And we were just this far from showing that this drug would really work when our research funding was shut off.
Shut off because his experiments had thrown him into a brutal confrontation with animal rights activists. For his lab experiments involved the use of animals, in this case, anesthetized cats, as a model to simulate head injuries. Why cats?
Well, the cat has been the most studied laboratory animal for the past 100 years, and I think we know more about the cat's brain than we know about the human's brain. And many of the mechanisms, many of the chemicals that make a cat's brain work, make a human's brain work.
This lab at LSU is closed now, but from 1983 to 89, this was where Dr. Carey conducted his experiments on about 700 cats. The cats were under general anesthesia, and Dr. Carey says they felt no pain. They were positioned on this table with their head in this vise. They had incisions made in their scalps to allow a small BB shot from this air gun to enter each cat's brain.
The fact of the matter is, cruelty to animals is something that should offend physicians. And there are better ways of doing research, Mike.
Dr. Neal Barnard heads PCRM, the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, a group which includes thousands of doctors who oppose the use of animals in medical research.
Even if his intentions were the best, shooting 700 cats through the head, decapitating them, letting them bleed to death, there's no way that I'm going to turn around and say, well, he had great intentions, so let's give him $2 million more. It's wrong.
What Dr. Barnard and others in the animal rights movement say is a rat is a cat, is a dog, is a pig, is a boy. And all of them should be treated with the same concern. So when the animal activist community found out about Dr. Carey's cat experiments in this laboratory, they were infuriated. Some wrote their representatives in Washington demanding that Dr. Carey's Army-sponsored research be shut down. U.S. Congressman Bob Livingston of Louisiana received many angry letters. He sits on the House subcommittee which allocates money for Army research, and he called for the GAO, Congress's General Accounting Office, to look into Dr. Carey's animal research. The GAO convened a panel of medical experts to review Dr. Carey's experiments, which were suspended pending the outcome of the panel's findings. Dr. John Jane, chairman of the neurosurgery department at the University of Virginia, headed that expert medical panel.
And we found it to be, as I said, unique, worthwhile, and should be continued. Wrote a report to that effect. We did. And my feeling was that that should have been the end of it.
But that wasn't the end of it. While the GAO committee was preparing its report, the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine received this letter from an employee at LSU. The letter, which was reprinted in this PCRM article, The Army's War on Cats, alleges that Dr. Carey's cats were in pain and that their crying disrupted work at LSU.
The crying of these animals was so loud that the people down the hall could not even work. They couldn't even see patients.
Who told you that?
I have a letter right here.
This is from D. Bonnevillian?
It's from someone who worked at LSU. I don't know anything more than what's printed there.
I talked to the person who wrote this letter.
Oh, great.
Do you know what she told me?
I'd be interested in hearing.
That it's not true. The person who wrote that letter was D. Bonnevillian, the secretary whose office was near Dr. Carey's lab at LSU. And what Bonnevillian told us was that she was getting her information not from what she herself had heard there, but from an article she read in Cats magazine. We read back to her the letter she wrote. I'm writing in regard to Dr. Michael Carey. I worked next door to Dr. Carey's lab for 2 years, and you cannot tell me that these cats did not suffer any pain.
Right, because when you shoot an animal in the head and don't give them any anesthesia...
Who told you that they don't get any?
It was in the cat article.
It's not true.
Well, when you write stuff and the public reads it, you perceive that as the truth.
So you thought it was the truth?
Yeah, yes.
So, but you didn't know when you wrote this letter?
All I know is what I read in that article.
Whatever Bonnevillian thought she read, it turns out the article never claimed the cats were without anesthesia. Dr. Howard Osofsky heads the department in which Bonnevillian works, and he investigated her letter.
She told me that she personally considered the experiments to be horrendous and not valuable.
So she is an animal activist.
There's no question. She's
philosophical difference
very
with Carey.
open and says that she's an animal activist.
But the letter itself, I mean, there were no crying cats.
Right.
The expert medical panel told the GAO that the treatment of the cats was humane, and that Carey's research was unique and worth continuing. And that did not go over very well with the man who originally called for the investigation, Congressman Livingston, when he heard the news from Dr. James.
He said something to the effect, what did you think of the research? And I said, we thought it was very good. And he became very distressed on the phone. And he said, what do you mean? Something like this. What do you mean you thought it was good? He said, I heard it was terrible. And I said, no. I said, our panel, it was great care, thought it was good research.
Whatever Congressman Livingston thought at the time about Dr. Carey's research, he declined to tell us about it on camera. But Dr. Richard Traceman, another one of the expert medical panelists, says he believes that Livingston just wanted an end to Dr. Carey's research. Because
his constituents felt that Dr. Carey was using these animals in an unanesthetized way, torturing these animals, which turned out not to be the case. Dr. Carey's cats were anesthetized properly. They were not in pain.
Nonetheless, the GAO decided to seek a second opinion, this time from animal doctors, animal anesthesiologists.
What I think was that the GAO thought to themselves, okay, it's the anesthetic was that's part of it. These are animals, so let's get animal doctors to look at anesthetics. Ergo, veterinarian anesthesiologists. But they were exactly the wrong people. I mean, it's ludicrous because they've never done any research on brain injury. These five distinguished people have not done any work on brain injury.
The veterinary anesthesiologists did not comment on the issue of pain, but they did criticize Dr. Carey for the method by which the cats were anesthetized. That method, they said, skewed the results of his research. So, with these differing opinions, where did the GAO come down in its final report?
They more or less weighed our panel against this panel and came down on the side of the veterinarians. And why, I'm not sure.
In any case, Dr. Carey's research was abruptly stopped. Why? Dr. Roy Schwartz of the American Medical Association gave us this assessment.
It's important research, it's critically important, and it needs to go on.
And yet it's been stopped.
Correct.
Stopped by the Army, we are told.
That's the mechanism that was used to stop it. It was actually stopped by animal zealots who want to eliminate the use of all animals for biomedical research.
And what you're saying, I guess, is that Representative Bob Livingston of Louisiana has been had by these animal zealots.
I think he was hoodwinked. I think he was misled.
And Dr. Schwartz went on to talk about the effect of the animal rights movement on medical research.
They have the potential for undermining the public confidence in the whole scientific enterprise, and therefore crippling that enterprise right at the time that we're making such major scientific advances. Right on the doorstep of our science at this time are some startling advances in Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease, cancer, genetic diseases, inherited diseases, and these people, and AIDS, and these people want to eliminate the use of animals, and we can't make those breakthroughs without the animals.
The Army agreed that the animal activists were ultimately to blame for shutting down Dr. Carey's research. An Army spokesman told us that Carey's research was worth pursuing, and if they could, they'd do it again. Ironically, just days before the GAO report was issued, Dr. Carey, still a colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve, was recalled to active duty in Operation Desert Storm. But even though his research had been stopped, threats from animal activists continued. His wife, Betty, a pediatrician, was home alone and terrified.
Sometimes people would just call at 2 a.m. and hang up, but there were other times when people would call and say, your husband is doing terrible things in the laboratory and he ought to be stopped, and we'll see to it that he gets stopped. Words to this effect. Yes.
You have in your lap
Oh, yes.
some of
right.
the things that were sent to you.
Yes, these kinds of things come.
Yes,
This was probably one of the most vicious, coming to our house, and somebody had really emphasized the point that they were out to get him. They are
put a
literally...
death head over your husband.
Exactly. My husband has been targeted by the animal extremists.
While his wife was receiving hate mail at home, Dr. Carey was in Saudi Arabia operating in desert field hospitals. John Knapp was one of the soldiers Dr. Carey saved during Desert Storm, using some of the techniques he was developing in his lab.
If it wasn't for Dr. Michael Carey, my son-in-law would be dead.
From Desert Storm all the way back to Vietnam, Dr. Carey has thought only of this.
As I've said, you know, when you look at the Vietnam Wall, you see a name, but I hear a voice saying, help me.
Despite the threats, despite the setbacks to his research, Dr. Carey is still trying. The Army recently granted him funding for a new research project, this one using anesthetized rats for experiments. But as we said, the animal activists insist that a rat is a cat, is a pig, is a dog, is a boy. And so they are bound to oppose Dr. Carey's new research program.